Hi, Booktube. So it's currently raining outside, so I might have to raise my voice a little bit. Today I'm going to do my review of Sword of Vengeance by Marc Olden. So this book is my Garb-August pick. This video is recorded in mid-June of 2023, but you won't see this until August of 2023. I think around August 2nd, August 1st or 2nd, depending on your time zone. Anyway, before I begin telling you what it's about and some of my general thoughts, I need to get some things out of the way. I'm not going to rate this book, but I will recommend it to people. Recommend you read Sword of Vengeance, because it is a good book. It's much better. It's a much better trashy book compared to The Five Fingers. So this book qualifies as trash according to Ollie from Criminology's standards. It features a weapon, a sword with a snake on it. It reads like a cheesy action movie. The descriptions in this book, and this book, by the way, was published in 1990, and the book taps on the public's fascination with organized crime and Far Eastern and the martial arts of the Far East. The public's fascination with it. Marc Olden was a martial arts enthusiast. Anyway, because of all of these things, I would say this book does qualify as a trashy book. But it is a fun read. It is a very fun read, I must say, and I enjoyed it very much. It's not perfect. It's not perfect. I wouldn't rate it a perfect 10 or a perfect 5, depending on your rating. But yeah, I enjoyed this book very much. So, what is this book about, you might ask? Well, it's a mixture of crime noir, so crime thriller, right? Detective fiction, crime noir, mixed in with fantasy. So it's a combination of fantasy and crime noir thriller. And so the story goes, in this world, reincarnation and Far Eastern mysticism is real. Reincarnation is real. And in the 1500s, so that's the 16th century, Japan was just about to be reunited, and there was one remaining holdout, I would say. One warlord, a daimyo, who held out against the one person who is unifying Japan. I believe his name is Hideyoshi, who unified Japan, most of it, for the most part at least, before the era of the shogun. And this last holdout has two military advisors and / bodyguards, or his bodyguard and his general. And this holdout warlord is betrayed by his general, and through political intrigue, he betrays the one castle holding out against the person who unifies Japan. And the one bodyguard who gets killed in a last desperate attempt of defending his master, his warlord master, vows revenge against this traitorous general, who is handing him over to the guy who's unifying Japan. And he says, I will take vengeance on you, even if it means going after several lifetimes, even if it means beyond the grave. So, fast forward to the mid-1980s or 1990. The book doesn't say what year the story takes place in, but it is 40 years or more since World War II. It doesn't say whether it's the mid-80s or it's 1990. Anyway, fast forward several years. The general who betrayed the last remaining holdout warlord has been reincarnated into an extremely powerful crime boss in the Triads, and he controls a worldwide crime empire. Meanwhile, the one bodyguard to that warlord, I forgot what his name was. I'm gonna go find his name. I'm gonna go find the chapter so I remember the name. So if you'll just bear with me for a second here. Here we go. So the general who betrayed his master, it was Kichi, but the bodyguard who vowed revenge was a man named Benkai. So Benkai is reincarnated into a half Chinese, half American young man named Todd, who is the son of an ex-cop called Frank De Palma. Frank De Palma who's an Italian, is an investigative journalist who's a former cop, and he has a long history of fighting organized crime. So, Todd is a strange individual. Now, the book doesn't get into, well, it does get into detail, but the book doesn't give away the detail that I'm interested in. Todd is the reincarnation of a 400-year-old samurai soul. And the book doesn't say whether it's two souls in one body fighting for one mind. The book talks about reincarnation, but I believe when Benkai vowed revenge, he called upon some evil spirits to make sure that his future incarnations remembered that betrayal in 1580 something, 1584, 85, yeah. So there you go. And so this crime boss gets a prophecy from a priest, from a Taoist priest, who says, you will die by the hands of a young man from the West in 3 weeks. And at this time, his crime empire is experiencing multiple crises. So he vows to make sure this prophecy doesn't come true, and he wants to track down this reincarnated soul, who the priest says. By the way, the name of this crime boss is Lin Pao. So Lin Pao is the main bad guy in this. And so he vows to kill this boy, this teenager, within 3 weeks, this reincarnated samurai. He himself doesn't know he's the reincarnation of a general who betrayed his master in medieval Japan. Medieval, early modern Japan. So he doesn't know that. And there's some other people from that time period are also reincarnated. Frank De Palma is not a reincarnation. Well, he is a reincarnation, but his previous incarnations are not talked about in this book. So his empire, Lin Pao's empire, is experiencing multiple crises, and Todd vows to bring him down because meanwhile, some of his friends, who is a gang called the Jade Eagles in America, the crime boss's enforcer gang in New York City, in Chinatown, are being killed off because Lin Pao fears that one of them, because they're in New York City, and meanwhile he is based in Taiwan, he fears that one of them is this boy who will destroy him. So the Jade Eagles team up with Todd, who is this strange character who somehow remembers his past lives and has natural martial arts skills since birth. He's a strange individual with these strange memories, and he tells his father, the ex-cop Frank De Palma, about him, and the cop just sort of goes along with it. Sorry, not the cop, the journalist. He's now an investigative journalist. He just goes along with it. Meanwhile, Frank himself is trying to protect his wife because his wife got some information from a dirty cop about some dirty details of a businessman who has close ties to the Chinese triads. And this guy, this businessman, has a dirty secret that somehow Frank's wife, and by the way, Todd is not the son of Frank's wife. He was born out of an affair he had in Hong Kong. So the adoptive mother, I would say. So Frank's wife knows too much, and the triads and this businessman want to take out his wife because she knows too much. So Frank De Palma also has an interest in bringing down the crime empire. And his son Todd has an interest in exacting revenge because of a past life crime that Lin Pao, the current crime boss, did because of a betrayal in a past life. He wants to, so this Lin Pao must be taken down via the sword. And there's this talk about karma because of all the horrible things he did in his life and in past lives. They're all now coming back to haunt him. And so the story takes place in the Philippines because Frank wants to take down this corrupt businessman who's called Nelson Berlin, who has close ties to the Chinese triads. He thinks he can take him down for some crime that one of his businesses that is operating in the Philippines has committed. Like there's a crime associated with one of his businesses taking place there. He can get evidence from there. So there's a lot of interlocking politics and interlocking stories in this book that I just don't have time to accurately describe. Anyway, so all these interlocking stories. So the investigative journalist, who is an ex-cop, with his son, who is a reincarnation of a samurai, basically plan to take down the crime empire. They plan to kill Lin Pao, who is this crime lord, and bring down this corrupt businessman. So they want to bring down this crime empire, and that's where we go from there. And of course, in all of that, reincarnation is real. There's also this weird thing where there's interventions from the gods or from heaven or spirits, where the weather changes, where there's thunder and light, where there's lightning storms happening abruptly to help the reincarnated soul of this samurai warrior. There's not even actually one singular sword that's supposed to take down Lin Pao. So the title is sort of misleading. The sword is the reincarnated soul, not a physical weapon. Although the bad guy, the Lin Pao, is taken down, spoiler alert, with a sword, it's not the sword from hundreds of years ago. So it's not a specific sword to take down the main bad guy. Now, yes, so I hope you can find a little bit of consistency in what I'm saying. I hope it's not all too rambly, that my talk. Let's move on to some of my general thoughts on this book. So I recommend this book. It's fast-paced, easy to read. There's some deliciously evil villains in this book, but there's also some horrible sexism and racial slurs in here. Surprisingly, though, there's a gay character in this book, an associate of Frank De Palma, and it talks about that there's this unjust law in Hong Kong against buggery, sodomy, that so Marc Olden seems to be speaking very pro-gay rights, but meanwhile the characters say a lot of sexist and racist words that I cannot repeat in this video. So it is very much a product of 1990. Nowadays it's very wrong to say these things. So it is a window into the social attitudes of the time. And there's some part of the backstory of this corrupt businessman Nelson Berlin takes place in 1944 China, so World War II China. There's a flashback, and the descriptions of the horrors of war is really really hits me. The horror, the horrors of war is very vividly described in one flashback chapter. And another thing that I want to say about this book is, in another book, I DNF'd it because the author's voice was very unfriendly. Like the narrator uses profanity liberally or uses slang liberally. It's not even a character's chain of thought. Meaning Marc Olden, the voice of the author, is very unfriendly. That was not so much a detraction from this book for two reasons. One, the book is fast-paced and a lot shorter compared to that other book that I DNF'd. And the other is, well, the story is fast-paced and engaging enough that I can look past the author's unfriendly language. I wish the book would also have told more about how this reincarnation, not how reincarnation works, but how people remember past lives. While some remember past lives, while others don't. I wish they got into more detail about that. So this book's not perfect, but in most other ways it is. It is a great read. And this would be one of those books that modern day editors would edit out all the nasty language in here. So there's the other F word. I think there's also the N word. I think there's some slurs against Chinese and against Italians in this book that I'm not going to repeat here, obviously. So this book would be totally unacceptable by modern standards. But the best part about this book, and here's the main reason why I would recommend it, it is a window into how organized crime, how the triads operated, and it talks about it, the close links to the Taiwan national government, the KMT, Chiang Kai-shek's political faction in China, the close ties that Chiang Kai-shek had with the triads, the gangsters of China. It talked about also the anxieties of that era of the organized crime when Hong Kong, this was published in 1990. Hong Kong was due to be transferred transferred over to China, one China, two systems, and the British were going to relinquish control of Hong Kong in 1997. So there were talks about how the Chinese triads needed to expand into different, wider markets, because there's the perception that the Communist Party is a lot more tougher on crime compared to the KMT and compared to the British colonialists, because they operated mostly in Taiwan and Hong Kong. So it is, and there's also talk about the transition into democracy in the Philippines, the end of the Marcos regime. So yeah, it's fascinating. The political developments of the early 1990s and late 1980s is well described in this book. It's an unorthodox method of learning. It's an unorthodox method of learning history by reading a novel. Now I want to know more. I want to separate fact from fiction, sort of like what alternate history does. So, highly recommend. Sword of Vengeance by Marc Olden. Trashy book, but a great window into the past. I would not say that this book has any philosophical gems in it, so I'm not going to take away anything from this book other than it was just a good time, a good read. I take that back. I will learn a little bit of history from this book. History of the time period, the late 1980s, early 1990s. The political and social trends of that era, based on how the author writes and what he's writing about. So yeah, totally recommend. Read Sword of Vengeance by Marc Olden if you can get your hands on a copy of this book. This book is also another, as you can see, it's a book from my library, which I run. So this is the second trashy book from the library that I run, that I picked up. All right, so I think I said so this in the beginning. This is filmed in June, but you won't see it until August. Right, thanks for listening in.